Welcome to the Beyond Jiu Jitsu podcast. This is episode 127. We are continuing our positional series today. This is position series number 4, guard.
Hello, Kieren.
Hello, Adam.
How are you?
I am really good. I'm coming off a solid jiu-jitsu weekend. I recently attended, as in last Sunday, 2 days after this, before this recording rather, I attended John Danaher's seminar here in Sydney. But we're going to be talking about that in depth because I learnt a lot of really awesome stuff, including some inside information about the coveted Danaher Death Squad New Wave edition. So we're going to be talking about that next week, but not to detract from today's episode, but it's going to be an interesting one.
Yeah. For people who have been listening to us for a while, you would have known, when we had a seminar with Mario Hayes, we did a What We Learned from Mario Hayes seminar with Craig Jones, What We Learned from Craig Jones. So we'll be recording that episode next week. I didn't do the seminar, so essentially, Kieren has told me a little bit just in conversation in the gym, what he learned and some of the, even just right now before recording, a little bit of things that John had mentioned about IBJJF and stuff like that. But I essentially said, oh man, like, don't tell me, let's wait
for the podcast.
Yeah, let's wait till next week. So it's a bit more of a, things that I'm going to be hearing from Kieren for the first time as to what he learned and some of the details and things that John said. And so it'll be I'm looking forward to that chat. However, this week we're continuing the positional series. So we started with back control, we did mount, we did side control. We're now just essentially doing guard. I know that is more than one position.
No.
However, this is something we can always return to and continue to do positional series. So we wanted to start with an overarching guard episode rather than from the beginning being like half guard, spider guard, De La Riva, reverse De La Riva, single leg
like
X,
a year
X
worth
guard,
of podcasts.
like so much, because then even half guard, you can be like, is it reverse half guard? Have you got the crossfire? Deep half, so many. So we're just essentially doing it.
Fuck you, Ollie.
Yes, it can be rather frustrating. So we're essentially just doing a bit of an overarching guard episode. So then we've ticked off the main ones of back control, mount, side control, and guard. Yeah. And then we can dive into more detail down the track as we continue the positional series and go, specific. Because someone had commented on Instagram, I forget the name, but had commented like, "Oh, I'm looking forward to the Neon Belly episode." It's
yes.
It's like, okay, we're not quite going into that segmented yet, but we will. We can do a whole episode on high mount. Yeah.
So it's different.
Anyway. Guard.
So if you are new to the position series,
if you are new to jiu-jitsu, guard. Well.
So we're following a format of introduction concepts, attacking, defending, and then resources at the end. That's the way it's structured. So introduction to guard. Do you prefer to play guard or are you more of a passer? Because normally most jiu-jitsu people fall into the one or two camps. Either you're predominantly a passer, that's your A game, or you're predominantly a guard player.
Yeah, that's true. And I think even at the highest level, people still have typically their preferred. Obviously, even at my level as not making the podium at Worlds, professional, ADCC, whatever. But even at my level, obviously you're competent at both. So, it goes without saying that professional grapplers are competent at both, but they will still have their preferred. I mean, even even Gordon Ryan, obviously you see him pull guard most of the time, right? But it doesn't mean you want to be fucking on the bottom playing guard against Gordon Ryan, right? But I think I've always been and still probably prefer to be on top. And I'll tell you what, I think right in the beginning, like we're talking my first 2 stripes of white belt, I probably preferred guard, which is usually, I think, the opposite to most brand new beginners because it's not intuitive, especially if you Australia, we don't really have people who come from a wrestling background. But if you think people in North America or even, all over Europe come from a wrestling background, obviously guard's not very intuitive, makes way more sense to be on top. And even people not coming from wrestling, that's usually the case. It's pretty copy paste advice you give white belts a lot of the time is get on top, stay on top, and whatever. However, I think those first early days, I liked playing guard because being quite tall and being, jiu-jitsu, what it was back then, opposed to today, where even, I don't want to say open guard was a new thing, but it was even more sort of, okay, it's closed guard and half guard,
And half guard was even seen to be an inferior position.
Yeah, prior to I started, it was, yeah. When I started, things like spider guard and all that already existed, but, it was definitely, it wasn't like today where it's very, very rare that you see people have closed guard.
Yeah.
But back then it was way more common. And yeah, so being quite tall, I felt really comfortable just to have closed guard. And even though I couldn't necessarily do a lot of sweeps or submissions or whatever, just people had a hard time, because obviously I'm training with other white belts, a hard time, opening my guard and that. However, for sure, once I learnt a little bit more, by the time I was a blue belt, I preferred to be on top. And it kind of played into my favor, because whenever I would compete, people would just instantly look at me and see how tall and long I am and go, oh man.
Particularly for your weight class, you were like 88 at that time.
Yeah, that's right. They would go, oh man, I don't want to be in that dude's guard. He's going to pull guard, so I'll pull guard first. And they'd pull guard, and then I would be like, yeah, sweet. And to the point where I would often get a lot of free 2 points just for tapping someone's foot with my foot as they pulled guard, and I would get 2 for it. But the other reason I like being on top is just because I feel like you have a slight bit more of a safety net, and you can be a little bit more in control of dictating the pace of the fight, especially because when you look at the rules as well, the person on top has the obligation to engage, so you can be the one that presses forward, or you can be the one, not that you should be backing out, but you can be the one who kind of, if you need a second, you can kind of take that second. But also a lot of the time when you fail at passing someone's guard, of course you can get caught in a submission, but sometimes that failure is just resulting in getting swept. And then a lot of the time you get swept and land in guard. So you're kind of very clearly still in the fight. However, if you're playing guard and you fuck up and you get passed, you've then, it's not the same, right? You're then down on points and you've got to recover from side control. So I feel like the price of failure when you're playing guard is bigger than the price of failure when you're passing. Although obviously we know it's not as clear as that, because you can fail in passing by getting armbarred or something, and then the fight's completely over.
So submissions aside, you're looking at, okay, you pass guard, that's 3 points, and you're in a dominant position. You're in mount. You're in side control.
There's also a psychological factor to it, because when you get swept and you land, in your guard, which a lot of the time happens, don't get me wrong, you can get swept straight to mount, and that fucking sucks. But if you get swept and you've still got your guard, it doesn't hurt as much psychologically. I mean, I've lost competitions from being swept to guard and almost not fighting the sweep that much, because I was so confident in my ability to sweep them back, and then not being able to sweep them back, and then losing the fight on points. But yeah, when you get your guard passed and someone consolidates side control, there's quite a psychological defeat there, So, and I love the feeling of passing someone's guard. I get more satisfaction out of passing someone than sweeping someone.
100%.
But yes, of course, playing guard has the submission aspect. The best satisfaction is submitting someone. But yeah, I like the feeling I get from passing someone. And I'm sure a lot of people who go the route of bearing bolos probably have a similar, feeling about taking the back. They go, man, it just feels so good when you take someone's back and get your seatbelt and hooks in, which yes, it does. But
particularly
for me submissions aside, because obviously that's the overall goal, I think my favorite feeling, my favorite move or technique to hit that gives me the most like sort of dopamine hit, I guess, would be passing someone's guard. For me, that feels better than sweeping someone, then taking someone down, then taking someone's back, then mounting them, whatever. Like that's the feeling that, I don't know quite how to put it into words, but it's a feeling that makes me feel like that's where I would do a mic drop, if you will, even though obviously the fight's not over. So
because it's the ultimate dominance over your opponent.
Yeah, that's what it feels like. Even though, you could argue back and forth about what position is the most dominant, but there's always going to be preference. I mean, we referenced this a few times over a previous few episodes about the Lex Friedman podcast with Hodger Gracie on it. And arguably the best position in jiu-jitsu is the back, right? But, Hodger's like, I'll take mount over the back any day.
Danaher talked about that as well.
Oh, did he really?
Yeah, he did. And
come on, give me a snippet.
I will. Yeah. And he said that the back is by far the most dominant position and nothing comes close.
Yeah. And I mean, like he wouldn't be wrong, right? But then I guess okay, that's hard, right? Because you always,
particularly for no-gi though.
Right. I guess that would have been more the topic, right? Mm-hmm. But yeah, like people's jiu-jitsu is so fleeting, how long does Hodger Gracie need to, I mean, by far the greatest of all time, right? And anyone who's sitting here going like, oh, what about Gordon, this and that? Like, even Hodger said Gordon will be the greatest of all time, but you can't call him that while he's not retired, which I don't know, but I think that's semantics. But anyway,
I agree.
You got someone who, for those who aren't educated about it, you got, a 10-time world champion in Hodger Gracie who retired, then came out of retirement to beat the shit out of Buchecha, and still essentially be like, yeah, man, I've been retired for, however many years, and you went on to become a 10-time world champion. I've come out of retirement and still kicked your ass, It would be the equivalent if all of a sudden GSP came out of retirement and beat the shit out of Khabib. That would be essentially what Hodger Gracie did, right? But jiu-jitsu was different then. Even he talked about back in his day, ADCC was essentially like the only no-gi competition. No-gi wasn't what it is now. And but how long does Hodger need to be retired before people say he's irrelevant and blah, blah, blah? And then let's fast forward 10, 20, 30, 40 years. How long before people start saying like, ignoring Gordon Ryan's opinion because Gordon Ryan's been retired for 15 years and is no longer relevant because but jiu-jitsu's not what it is today, what it was back then. Anyway, there's a long way of saying, that for Hodger, mount's his preferred position, right? But
I think just to jump on the Danaher Riding Club, I think from his perspective, he was coming at it purely from an analytical point of view. Like, hey, if you assess across all these different grappling disciplines what the most dominant position is as per high percentage moves, it's the back.
Yeah. And I mean, I go even further to say the hands down best position is like the back where you have them belly down.
Oh, yeah.
Which we call in Portuguese.
Chicken fillet, right?
Yeah, like butterflying a chicken. A espalhar frango, which is like to, butterfly or spread out a chicken. Yeah. Yeah, like, so I mean, that is the worst position to be caught in.
Yeah, you can tap someone just
especially if they have like a body lock on or something.
Yeah.
A body triangle. Like, oh, fuck. Anyway, so I prefer to be on top. I've also, again, I'm just some chump of a black belt, but, at least within my, small circle. Well, I don't think it's that small, but at least like,
where's this going?
I don't, it just sounds so wanky to say I'm known for, because I'm not known for anything, but like within my small circle, I'm known for like having really good top pressure and, and I've trained with just random strangers who have said, who know that I come from,
do you have a heavy
or whether they know
bro?
Or don't know my jiu-jitsu background. They'll be like, man, you've got that real sort of like alliance pressure. And again, for those who don't know, my coach, Fabrice Gurgel, known for big, heavy top pressure. I also trained with like Bernardo Faria and big, heavy
Yeah.
dudes with really good pressure passing.
Mm.
And I like being on top and really good shoulder pressure and just essentially like making someone feel like they want to quit, Yeah. What about you?
I'm the same.
You're
I'm
top,
a clone of you, dude.
Yeah.
Like,
Just a shorter, stockier version.
Yeah,
of
shorter, uglier, dumber version. Yeah, like, come on. You've taught me, we've done this podcast so many times. Like, we have, somewhere around 127 hours with talking about jiu-jitsu around these concepts, and probably way more hours inside the gym, hundreds of hours. So, yeah, I'm very, very influenced by that. Love passing, love pressure passing, love that dominance feeling. I feel like it is the ultimate form of displaying dominance over an opponent, is passing their guard and controlling them.
Yeah.
I mean, not to say that guard isn't fun. I love leg locks. I love guard. I love, kipping into a ashigarami and taking the heel home. Like, I love that sort of shit. It's fun. I love bolos and inverting because it's fun and it's, cool, doing cool, crazy inverts, taking the back, but nothing beats smashing through an opponent's guard and dominating them.
Agreed. So let's make sure that doesn't happen. Okay. So guard concepts. So, again, like what guard are we talking about? We could do concepts just on one particular guard. So we'll try to keep it overarching. My advice for or the concepts of guard that I look for is really the ability to establish a guard. And the more proficient your training partner is, the less they will let this happen. So I try to teach this to my students when we're working on passing. It's like, guarantee you every single person listening has done this and trained with people who do this, that when you're passing and a roll starts, you essentially step into their guard, more or less completely let them establish their grips and set up their guard and whatever before you kind of switch on. And then you do all this work to break grips and disengage just to get back to where you were, so you could do like a bullfighter or a toreando pass or whatever, So that bad habit becomes less apparent the more experienced you become and your training partners become, or at least it should do, right? So that means you need to work harder to establish your guard. And there's particular drills that you can do to help that. I don't mean drills as in like, hip escapes and inverting. I mean, there's ways you can structure a particular like training, not program, but like a round or whatever to replicate that. But I believe establishing your guard is a very, very crucial concept, and it's really going to tie into attacking and defending. But that initial grip fight is super important. So let's imagine you're lying on your back. You're not playing seated guard. It's open guard and you're on your back because whatever. Maybe you were seated and they picked your heels up and you're now on your back, whatever. So the strength of guard versus the person passing is that, if you look at it just from a really scientific or a data point of view, you've got 4 limbs against 2, okay? Because the person passing typically just has their hands because their feet are usually on the mat or their knees are on the mat. Yes, there's now all this leg pinning and whatever, but I mean,
cutting and
well, I mean, but you know what I mean.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
That's where the strength is. If you really try to put it a bit more sort of just black and white. When you're lying on your back, right? The problem is that as the person passing engages with you, their hands make it to your legs, right, before your hands can reach them, okay, because of the fact you're lying on your back and, that's the way they approach you. Your legs are the first thing that they physically can touch, okay, and the first thing that they can touch with is their hands. So what you need to do to establish your guard in this sort of scenario is you need to be able to win a grip fight of feet versus hands for long enough until your hands can reach them. And sometimes this is, half a second that this grip fight goes for. Sometimes it goes for a little bit longer. Now, what do I mean grip fight? Well, I want you to imagine the exact same way you might grip fight when you're standing. And we'll just imagine we're in the gi for this to make it very clear. Imagine you're standing, and that someone reaches for your collar to get their grips while you're standing, and you kind of break the collar grip or you swat the grip away, and there's that essentially like hand fighting, grip fighting going on. The exact same thing, but instead of it being 2 hands versus 2 hands, it's 2 hands versus 2 feet, right? So your ability to pummel your legs and kind of I don't know if in the rest of the world it's taught like this, but when you're taught to tread water, they teach you like
Egg
to
beater.
do the egg beater, like a cake mixer thing. So like your ability to essentially pummel, this is all the grip fighting you're doing, right? And you only need to do that for long enough until your hands can come into play so you can establish your guard, right? And but if you don't learn that skill, and you continue, and then you start training with more experienced, advanced training partners who don't have that bad habit of letting you establish a guard, you're going to start to have those roles where you don't really know what went wrong, but you just instantly got past, right? And it's because that the person on top, they never went into your guard, they put you into their pass, right? So you never get to establish a guard. So this is a very important concept of grip fighting with your guard, that feet versus hands grip fight as a means to establish a guard, right? Because how can we even talk about attacking, defending and, the rest of the structure of this episode if you can't even establish your guard? How can we create a drill that replicates this? Well, let me give you one of my most hated favorite drills, because this is a fucking punish. And every time I do it in the gym, people like everyone loves and hates it because it sucks to do because it's super hard, but like it's a great drill. And obviously when we're doing anything, and I believe I would have said this in all the other positional episodes, anything we're talking about, every position in jiu-jitsu essentially has a top and a bottom, so to speak, right? So anything we say, you can just reverse engineer, and you're doing it for the other person. So this drill is just as much a drill for getting better at passing as it is for guard, right? Mm-hmm. This is not, well, unless you're doing a drill where you're specifically, okay, the person on top is going to let you do this, right? That's not the case here, okay? So here's the drill. You have your partner, and the rounds are only 15-second rounds, okay? What you have to do, take notes, people, if you've never done this drill, right? This is a fucking great drill, right? And my students have done it, and I know one particular friend of mine who listens to this podcast, Ali, he's got Elements Jiu-Jitsu in Bahrain. He knows the exact drill I'm about to describe, and I'm sure his students probably do it because it is such a good drill. So 15-second rounds, you start standing. One of you is going to pull guard and establish your guard. And this is to be done at the intensity of a roll, okay? What we're essentially trying to do is replicate either the start of a match or the very end of a match, okay? Like the way I was taught this drill was we're trying to replicate the start of the match. However, I found you get something more tangible in the motivation to your students if you tell them you're trying to replicate the last 15 seconds of a match.
And you're down points.
And you're down on points, right? So
whoever's pulling guard is obviously up on points.
That's right, yeah. So the person pulling guard, if you can sweep them or submit them in 15 seconds, like that's fucking awesome, do it. But essentially the guard puller, imagine what you're trying to do is, you've got
stall.
Kind of stall.
Yeah.
Pull guard and establish a guard. If you can like get to close guard, very difficult to pass close guard in 15 seconds. Very difficult, right? The person on top, you're essentially trying to blitz, man. You've only got 15 seconds. So, you've got 15 seconds you need to score because you're down on points, or more about a passer learning not to fall into someone's established guard was why it was taught to me is replicating the start of the fight. They've pulled guard and you don't want to let them establish a guard for 10, 15 seconds, you blitz them. This has other benefits, right, of teaching people the psychological part of competing and how you can, if for 10, 15 seconds you blitz, even if you – actually, I'm going a little off topic. I'll leave that point for later on. Right? And then after 15 seconds – there's only a 5-second interval. That's enough time for you to both stand up and now the other person pulls guard.
Just to clarify, you have to let them pull guard. You can't fuck around and like fight their grips, run away around the gym and shit, and then the timer goes off and you're like, oh, sweet. You have to whoever is pulling guard gets to establish their grips and then go straight away. You can like beat them to the punch and like throw their leg away if they do a shit lazy guard pull, but you have to effectively let them pull.
That's right. Yeah. So that's exactly it. It's only a 15-second round. So the person pulling guard is not fucking around, dicking around, moving, and with 2 seconds left pulling guard. No. And at the same time, as soon as the timer goes, you just get your grip and pull guard. Yep. At the same time, the person who's on top, because standard rules, right? You have to have a grip before you're allowed to pull guard. So the person who's going to be on top, you're not swatting away grips. Yeah. You're not like, you essentially let them make their grip. But the second they start pulling guard, it's go time. So like you said, if you can knock their leg out of the way and fall straight to side control, you do it. Right? Yeah.
That's a punish lazy guard pulling.
That's right. This drill done correctly is essentially multiple 15-second sprints.
Yeah. It's like a Sparta set.
Which is fucking hard. Like think about, a sprint. The best sprinters in the world, their sprint goes for 10 seconds. Yeah. It's like sprinting for 15 seconds is hard. Yeah. I guess a 200-meter sprint is still a sprint, but past that, runners aren't sprint. Like a sprint is a sprint. So 15 seconds. And then when you do 10 of these rounds, which is usually how I do it. So I'll do 10. So you essentially have 5 guard pulls, 5 on top, and then you would change partners. It's a punish, man. It's really hard. But this is one of the best drills. Because you're learning, let me go back to where I was getting off topic now, because you're learning 3 crucial skills. For what we're talking about today, you're learning guard establishment, right? Like I said, if you can sweep or submit them in 15 seconds, that's awesome. But if you can just establish your guard, it's in 15 seconds, that's great because it's very difficult to pass any established guard in 15 seconds.
If ever you land in close guard in this drill, people usually just give up.
Yeah. You can't do shit, right? Yeah. But any established guard doesn't, if you can put a lasso in and a foot on the bicep, it's very hard to pass a lasso spider guard in 15 seconds.
Like a really deep De La Riva or something.
Yeah, or worm guard whatever it is, X guard, whatever it is. Very hard to pass an established guard in 15 seconds.
How do you pull into X guard?
Bro. Don't know.
I was just thinking. You'd pull and then go next guard.
Well, yeah, sort of. Yeah, like essentially think you're pretty much pulling to mount, but then just making sure your X goes in rather than them sitting down.
Yeah, good point.
So the person on bottom's learning guard establishment, what we're talking about today. But the person on top is learning how not to let someone establish a guard, right? And not fall into that bad habit. The third thing I wanted to mention that was, a bit more off topic, but while we're talking about this drill, is if we do it like how I was taught it, where you're replicating the start of a match opposed to the end, you're learning a very important psychological tool that you can use. Because for most of us, when we go compete, we're competing against someone we don't know. It's not Gordon Ryan versus Felipe Pena where, even if they'd never fought each other before, they're both well-known professional athletes. There's so much hours of tape you can watch, and you can essentially have a game plan and prepare for a game plan and train for a game plan. This isn't the case. You're just a bracket. You don't know who the fuck that dude is, whatever. So if you do this, let's say whether they pull or you pull, whatever it is, but this initial, if you start a match and you implement a 10, 15 second sprint, 10, 15 second blitz, even if you gain 0 positional advantage, you weren't able to sweep them, you weren't able to pass them, you weren't able to take them down, whatever, you have made massive gains psychologically. Because a lot of people listening who have competed have probably fought one of these dudes where for the first 10, 15 seconds, they go fucking hard. And even if they make no progress, you're then standing there going,
This
holy
guy's a
fuck,
fucking
this
loon.
dude's a holy fuck.
Yeah, who is this guy? Yeah.
I can't do this for another, oh my God.
Yeah.
You know, so there's a huge psychological component to it where
Yeah.
and the way that I say it to my students is like, because your opponent doesn't need to know, and logic goes out the window when you're in a match.
Yeah.
Sometimes they don't need to know that you can't maintain that pace for the entire match. They don't know that. I mean, you know that, but they don't need to know that, right? What I say to my students is that first 10, 15 seconds, I don't want you to think that you're dictating or setting the pace of the match, because then that's going to start you to think, but I can't maintain that pace for 5, 6, whatever belt you are, minutes, right? I can't maintain that pace for 8 minutes. So I don't say set the pace. I say that first 10, 15 seconds, you're setting the tone of the match, right? So, and it can already take you leaps and bounds psychologically in the match, right? If you set that tone by essentially doing a 10, 15 second blitz, you know, and sometimes it also pays off positionally. Sometimes it does result in you getting the guard pass or in you getting the sweep. But what I'm saying is, even if you gain 0 positional advantage, you gain a psychological advantage. So this drill is one of the best fucking drills. And then the fourth thing is like hammers your cardio like nobody's business. Like it's just a great drill that sucks so many nuggets.
Yeah.
It fucking hurts this drill.
Speak from experience. It's a tough drill.
Yeah. Done properly. I mean, well, like anything, right? It's like
done properly. You can fuck around with it, but
you fuck around with fucking pull-ups and be like, they're easy, because you're fucking around. Like, do them properly. They're hard, bro.
Stop kipping, bro.
Yeah.
And with the psychological component, I've used this to force people to pull guard. Like particularly when I was a white belt and didn't know too many, I knew them, but couldn't perform to a decent ability, gi takedowns. I used to just rip on the collar and shit and make them pull guard, like scare them into pulling guard.
Yeah.
Like, oh, fuck, I'm about to get taken down. This dude is like strong and he's going batshit. I'm pulling guard. I'm like, sweet.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. 100%. So, it's a really good drill. If we talk about attacking from guard, this for me is kind of going to go attacking and defending together a little bit, because, you know, if we're talking about defending, we're talking about what? Defending a guard pass, essentially, because you're playing guard, right? So it's not like the positional series episode back control, where defending is escaping the back and not getting submitted. If we're talking about guard and defending, we're talking about defending a guard pass. And
I see what you're saying. Yeah, you kind of flip it.
What else would you be if you're playing guard? What are you defending against?
Your guard pass, the guard pass.
Your guard getting past.
Yeah,
you know,
100%.
Or someone's sitting back on a footlock, right? If you want to,
fuck, I hate that shit. I always punish people that do that. Like try to anyway.
Yeah. I try to punish people to anything. Walk in the gym.
Do anything.
Hey, coach, fuck you.
You exist.
Punching,
you breathe.
yeah.
Oh shit.
So, and attacking and defending, I'm kind of going to put together, because defending, like I said, is essentially defending guard passes, which we could go back to our concept of, well, if you have an established guard, that goes a long way. But then essentially we're talking about guard retention, right? And why I want to put these two together is because if you have good guard retention, you open up the opportunity to for attacks. What do I mean by that? Well, again, it feels like the 10th time I've said this episode. I'm sure there's people listening who have had gone through a phase or a period of time with a particular submission or sweep from guard where they've chosen to stop doing it because every time they attempt it, they get their guard pass. Every time I try to triangle someone, they, rip their head out and pass. Every time I try to, do this scissor sweep or whatever, like they do this and they pass and, fuck man, that sweep shit doesn't work. That man, I'm not doing that anymore. However, if you have really good guard retention, you're then free to essentially attack whatever you want. If you can go from a failed triangle resulting in a guard pass to a failed triangle resulting in just that, a failed triangle
Back to your guard.
And then back to your guard. You'll then like, imagine if I could just like essentially matrix you or give you a magic tablet that said it is impossible. Your guard is not even,
Penetrable.
Yeah, Rodolfo Vieira, not even Marcelo Garcia, not even Gordon Ryan. It is impossible for anyone in the world to pass your guard. You would be like, well, I'm just going to attack sweeps and submissions left, right, and center because no matter what, like they're the only three options. You're in my guard, I sweep you, or I submit you. So the key to attacking from the guard, in my opinion, is having really good guard retention, right? Because then failed attacks, and no attack works all the time, right? Like this is another thing. Sometimes people go for an armbar and maybe the dude escapes, but like you still retain your guard. But then they all of a sudden think like, oh man, like fuck, that was my best attack. I can't armbar him. It is unrealistic to think 100% of your attacks will land. The same way it is very unrealistic for a boxer to think that 100% of the punches they throw will land.
Does that mean they're going to stop throwing punches?
That's right. You don't, yeah.
Fuck no.
That's right. Oh, fuck, man, he blocked that right hook. I won't be able to land one all match.
Yeah.
That's not how it works.
It's illogical.
So your ability to have good guard retention is, in my opinion, what allows you to become incredibly offensive with your guard and attack left, right, and center, whether it's submissions or sweeps. And that's why I wanted to put attacking and defending together because, defending is essentially guard retention.
The route to attacking.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. So how do we have good guard retention? Well, I mean, there's a lot of things, but there's a few like sort of key points that I could highlight. The first is, and this would be more targeted to beginners, they have a bad habit of overreaching with their legs, okay? Unless you're engaged in something, your knees should be tucked to your chest. Because let's talk about getting your guard passed just as going to side control for a second, just to make it very, very black and white. Let's imagine there's no such thing as back takes. There's no such thing as mount, Let's imagine it is just to guard and side control. If someone can't separate and side control is what? Chest to chest.
Mm-hmm.
If someone can't separate your knees from your chest, they can't get side control. Side control doesn't exist if your knees are glued to your chest, right? Obviously, they can't stay there forever, but your knees to your chest, the same way you teach beginners like guard in jiu-jitsu when they don't know what that word even means. You say, oh, in jiu-jitsu, our legs are our guard, like boxers' arms are their guards, right? Like, I mean, boxers don't leave their arms out extended, right? They extend them when they're doing something with them, which is what? Throwing a punch. Otherwise, their guard is tucked in, protecting their face, right? So it should be the same with your guard. Your knees are tucked in unless, you're extending them to do something. Don't just like, for no logical reason, extend, like open that space away. You're essentially doing the equivalent of a boxer dropping their hands, right? And you see that in fucking every bloody boxing movie in the world. The coach will be like whacking them in the head every time they drop their hands, okay? So that's the first sort of thing, right? The grip fighting is another massive one, which I covered in concepts. That's part of your guard establishment, right? Learning how to win that initial grip fight of hands versus legs grip fight until your legs come into play so you can establish, okay? The grip fighting, the knees to your chest. And another one that I'm going to credit my man Levi Jones-Leary for.
Yeah, I was thinking of this one.
This was something I've known, but he was the one who put it into a dialogue for me.
Could articulate it. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Like, I mean, it's not hard to articulate, but I'd never had someone speak it to me in words.
Yeah.
That when Levi.
Always sign language and interpretive dance.
I learned this through interpretive dance.
Yeah.
Which is that your head never passes your knees. So imagine you're on your back with your knees tucked to your chest, right? Your head should not go outside of your knees, right? Because your guard starts to collapse when that happens. And there's a few drills you can do to practice this. But this is also where inverting starts to happen, which for me, I think is the next most important part of guard retention.
And another one that Levi mentioned was keeping your feet in between your opponent's shoulders and their waist. So if you can keep your feet pointed in that range.
He actually describes it as laser beams.
Laser beams,
but I'll give you a really great, like, so what he means by laser beams. Remember laser pointers that were all the rage, like whatever it was, 20, 30 years ago?
Yeah.
Yeah. For you, probably before you were born, the old laser pointer. Yeah. Right. Imagine, so Levi would explain it as, imagine your feet are laser beams and the laser's got to be hitting your partner's chest or somewhere on their body, right? So yeah, imagine if you got laser pointers and taped them to the outside of your ankles, right? Like if you can't see the red dot on your opponent, right, your feet essentially are pointing into space, into nowhere, which means your opponent could get on the inside or the outside. So that's a great tip as well. But so your head needs to stay in between your knees, and this is where inverting starts happening. Now, inverting, I think, is probably definitely one of, if not the most important aspect to guard retention. Now, I believe not years ago, but like 6 months ago or whatever, we got a comment from someone.
Over a year ago, yeah. It was a long time ago.
Fucking inverting, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, he mentioned that he used inverting to discredit your jiu-jitsu. But I'm paraphrasing here because I still remember this comment. It was something along the lines of he was saying that it was an example that you don't know what you're talking about because you spoke about the importance of inverting. And in his gym, no one inverts because it's shit and you're just going to get smashed or whatever. It was so dumb.
Moron.
It was so fucking dumb.
Yeah. It's funny because that gym must be onto something despite all the best dudes in the world inverting.
It's got to be a troll. Surely he's not serious. But it was funny.
Yeah. I've trained with current people who do nothing, do in little air quotes, nothing other than hip escaping to avoid their guard getting past, and their guard is fucking really hard to pass. Why is inverting so good though? Because multiple reasons. One, that dude that has a impassable guard from hip escapes took 30 years to get proficient at it, whereas the dude whose guard is just as difficult to pass took 1 year of inverting. So it's just more efficient. But inverting is not purely a guard retention tactic. It can turn into an invert to retain guard that becomes a leg entanglement or whatever else.
Or a back take or anything.
Yeah, there's so many other parts of inverting. This is also why the head in between your knees is important. So you know how you'll learn as a beginner, one of the first double attacks, you'll learn an Americana from mount, and then you'll learn why Americanas don't work very often is because if your arm gets separated from your body and you can't take your arm back to your body, you take your body to your arm. So people turn to their side, you attack the arm bar on the other arm. So that's where inverting and like Granby rolls and that come from. So if someone's passing your guard and your hips start collapsing to the side, so your head starts being taken outside of in between your knees, you tuck and put your head back because you can't bring your knees back.
You take your head to
like
your
the
knees.
Americana, because you can't bring your arm back to your body, because you can't bring your knees back to your head, you take your head back in between your knees, and this creates the invert, right? So there's some of the most important parts of guard retention, in my opinion, like the initial grip fighting, keeping your knees to your chest, the laser beams, the head between your knees, and then inverting.
Both of those concepts that we said we credited to Levi for articulating, they both apply to inverting because
they do.
If you're inverting, you're also keeping your feet laser beamed on your opponent. Because if you think about, say, they try to pass around to north-south, right? If you don't do anything about it in terms of an invert and bring your feet back, then your feet aren't pointing at them. If you invert, your feet are then pointing at them.
That's another good point as well, because inverting doesn't only have to be that sideways invert that you see really advanced bearing bolo people do, or that you do in a warm-up when you're in lines. An invert can just be exactly that. When someone passes around to north-south, you essentially stacking yourself. Like that's an invert, okay? So it doesn't always have to be this sideways roll. And it's just quicker, right? Someone walks around to north-south, it is way quicker just to stack yourself and point your laser beams at them than to fucking hip escape around a 180.
And do you really think you're going to be able to hip escape faster than they can walk? Or like scurry? No.
Scurry.
Yeah, scuttle.
No. Right. So the last thing I then want to talk about regarding inverting is something that I use to get better at it. And this, to be honest, was not something I started doing until brown and black belt to really take my guard to another level. So I'd always been quite fortunate with having even though I prefer to be on top, we established at the beginning, I was always relatively fortunate at having a difficult guard to pass because I've got long legs. However, I think it has its pros and cons. I never really had great guard retention. And especially as I got to like brown and black belt, I started to see that a bit more, that any failed attacks would typically result in a guard pass when I started fighting other brown and black belts. And inverting is not really my thing. I can invert, it's not a problem for me, but it's not like I'm a bolo guy. But I needed to get better at inverting for better guard retention. So what did I do? Instead of just inverting for guard retention, I spent a good amount of time, probably 6 months, where all I did when I played guard was attack bearing bolos. Why? Not because I particularly wanted to do bolos, although it is fun to bolo someone and take their back. It was more that if I only inverted for guard retention, that meant whether I was allowed to practice my inverting or not was completely out of my control. It was dependent on my partner getting past my first lines of defense when it comes to passing my guard. So therefore, I only got to practice my inverting if someone was almost passing my guard. In other words, out of my control. But I wanted to get better at inverting to help my guard retention, not so much just get better at guard retention. So I started to do bolos because then it's in my control. I was able to practice inverting because a bolo is an inversion technique. So I spent 6 months essentially just practicing inverting through bolos. So then I got to choose when I could invert essentially. And practicing bolos for 6 months made me way better at inverting. So then when it came to the guard retention aspect of inverting, the skill of inversion
and the
was not a problem, right? I then just had to marry the guard retention and the inversion, whereas previously I was trying to work on guard retention and inverting at the same time. And when I got to work on those two things was up to my opponent, whereas now I went away, fixed inverting, and then I just had to marry it to guard retention.
Yeah.
So that's my opinion. Yeah, there's that one dude that probably still doesn't listen to the podcast that, has probably opened his own gym called Hip Escapes or something.
Hip Escapes are us. Let's go.
But again, that's why I kind of wanted to put attacking and defending together because I believe, defending is guard retention. I mean, we could go into more specific, like, if we're talking about the gi, don't let them get double pant grips. Like that's a hard grip. You want to defend that grip, break that grip. We could talk, how do you break that grip? Okay, we could go into more details. Like I said, it's a bit more of a overarching. Those finer details of attacking and defending, in my opinion, are better spoken about when we're talking about specific guards. If we're talking about collar sleeve guard, attacking collar sleeve, attacking the omoplatas, the triangles, the shotgun.
Because in each guard, there's like a critical grip you need to break first. Or
and a
something
critical
you need to control.
grip that can like shut down your guard, right? So then we can
100%.
talk about, you got to defend this grip or whatever.
100%. And it's too much of a rabbit hole. There's way too many techniques. The sport has thousands and thousands of moves. So we're talking more concepts. So far we've talked about, in terms of guard retention, you spoke about keeping your head between your knees to your chest. The laser beam technique meaning your feet need to be pointing at your opponent, and working on inverting and combining all three. Once you can add those into inverting, it will vastly improve your guard retention.
100%, massively. I mean, if it worked for me, it could work for you guys.
Yeah. You're a big dude to invert as well. So
yeah, I'm not the smallest dude. Yeah, I got that post-surgery belly getting in the way as well, but I'm still getting.
You got a lot of body to invert there, bro.
That's right. So resources, if we're talking about guard, well, like most of these positional series, when we talk about resources, we're essentially just referencing, instructionals and any particular ones that stand out. All I would name is a few people who are well known for particular guards. So it's going to depend on what you want to do. Like, let's say Mikey Musumeci is one of the best Sparta guard players in the world. You got Levi and Mikey Musumeci if you like bolos. You've got, Marcelo Garcia if you like, butterfly guard or X guard. You've got Bernardo Faria if you like deep half guard. Yeah. Obviously, again, every
Gordon
episode
Ryan.
we pretty much say anything from Gordon Ryan.
Gordon Ryan's half guard is very good.
Yeah, you got Craig Jones if you like Z guard, right? Yeah. So, whichever one of those guards that you want to pursue. All I will say is don't just buy a million fucking instructionals. Like pick one and work your way through it, right? And there's a lot of
Danaher has
a lot of information there.
Whole systems on it.
Yeah, he's got systems on how to choose the correct instructional.
He does, yes. Yes. During the seminar he did, the first question was something along the lines of, like, it was a bit of a
Did it do like it as in at the end? He did like a Q&A.
Oh yeah, we went over time, man. Like we did. So the seminar was 3 hours of actual technique. And the first 2 hours, everyone was fucked. Everyone was sweating because it was all stand up pretty much. And then after we completed the seminar, he went into Q&A. So it wasn't part of the seminar; it was after, and it was a whole hour and 15 minutes, and people were queuing up for the next one. And
he did 2 seminars back to back.
Yeah, there was like a last minute. The second one was a different technique, and it was a little bit later on. But yeah, he spent over an hour talking, and the first question was a bit of a suck up question. It was like, how do we study your instructionals?
Oh God.
Yeah, so Danaher spent probably 15 minutes, I shit you not, answering this question in minute detail, and he spoke about his philosophy about creating the instructionals, like the history between him and BJJ Fanatics. We got a whole lesson on it. It was great. It was actually really entertaining. I'll save it for the next episode though, because I've got a lot to talk about in terms of Danaher.
I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, guys. So that was not the final positional series episode, but the final
countdown.
The final of like the sort of overarching main sort of ones that we want to go over. We'll go into more
next time we cover the positional series. It will be,
although we haven't done stand up, that's a position.
It is a position. We could, but we're jiu-jitsu guys. We're not fucking wrestlers. Fuck that.
We'll get a wrestler on and then get a judo guy on.
Yeah, nah, fuck that. Judo is lame. I want to get thrown really hard by Samir next time. So the next time we cover this series, it will be going into more detail. It will be taking one of these positions we've brushed over, be it, a specific, maybe Kimura trap, knee on belly, a specific guard, right? Yeah. And we're going to talk about that with the same sort of intro concepts, et cetera, et cetera. And the way I recommend that we do that, and we're going to do that, is we'll put out a bit of a poll to the community and see what you guys want us to tackle, and then we'll take it in that order.
Because there's obviously a million positions, and if we've got a few listeners who are like, "Hey man, do spider guard,"
we'll do
opposed
spider
to
guard,
us doing like, I don't know, fucking whatever Z guard, and it turns out that none of our listeners
no
give
one
a shit
gives
about
a shit about Z guard. Yeah, 100%. So that's how we'll do it, just to give back to the community. But what's coming up on the Beyond Jiu Jitsu podcast is next episode. We already alluded to it. We're going to be talking about the John Danaher Extraordinaire Seminar. And then the episode after that, we have a surprise guest that we're bringing on.
Yeah, we can tell them.
Sure, go for it.
Yeah, well, we've just got someone coming on for the Australian listeners. You've probably heard of Subversion. Subversion is like a fight organization. Think like, Who's Number One, but just locally here in Australia. Their last one actually was streamed on Flow Grappling, wasn't it?
I believe so.
Yeah, so I believe this one will be as well. So it's one of those sort of events where you just have, a bunch of different super fights. So we have one of the organizers from Subversion coming on prior to their upcoming event in March.
It's called Equinox, this one.
Yeah, which
Looks like a decent.
Jeremy's on, right?
I think so.
Yeah,
and,
so Jeremy
and,
Paul Skinner, who we've had on the podcast before.
And Baby Dave, who Jeremy fought at ADCC trials finals for Oceania. So looking forward to both of those matches. Really
Yeah. So anyway, so they're the next 2 episodes coming up.
And then episode 130, which is the episode after that, is our Q&A episode. So
that's right.
If you have a question, we do have some open spots for questions. We're still taking questions all the way up until we record the episode.
Do we take them in audio format, Kieren?
I believe we do. We take them in audio.
Cool.
And how do I submit a question though, Adam?
I think if you go onto our Instagram at Beyond Jiu Jitsu _podcast, there will be a link tree. And right there, you can click a link. Man, it's like just recording a WhatsApp message.
Wham, bam. Thank you, ma'am. Let's
send
go.
a message.
Off you go.
Easy.
Straight off your phone.
Yes.
And I think there's a link in the description as well. So you can do that.
Oh,
mate.
God.
Links
how
everywhere.
How can you miss it?
Links galore. And so that is a wrap from the boys here at the Beyond Jiu Jitsu podcast.
Guys, thanks so much for listening. As always, we will catch you
next
time, maybe.
Bye-bye.